Before we begin, I want you to stop for a moment and think about the world we are living in right now. Do you ever feel overwhelmed when you see the constant news of racism, wars, and deep inequality? Do you sometimes wonder whether humanity has learned nothing from its past mistakes? If you have felt that frustration, that weight on your shoulders, you are not alone. This video is about Nelson Mandela, but not as a distant figure trapped in history books. It is about a secret power he carried, one that turned the darkest oppression into the brightest light of hope. By the end of this story, you will see why Mandela's life is not only a memory of the past, but a guide for the present. His strength, his vision, and his choices hold lessons that we desperately need in today's divided world. So stay with me, because what you are about to hear may shift the way you see yourself, your community, and even the conflicts that surround us. This is not just Mandela's story. It is ours, reflected through the struggles we continue to face every day. I must confess that the reason I tell this story is not just admiration for Mandela as a leader, but because his journey awakened something inside of me, and I believe it will awaken something inside of you as well. Mandela's story is not about a man who fought and won. It is about a man who transformed the meaning of victory itself. In a world where revenge is expected, he chose forgiveness. In a system built on hate, he chose unity. When I think of Mandela, I don't only see South Africa's history. I see the mirror of our modern times. Everywhere we turn, there is division, whether it is racial injustice in the streets of major cities, economic inequality that leaves millions behind, or wars that shatter nations. We find ourselves asking, is there any way forward? Mandela's answer was yes, and that yes is why this story matters now more than ever. My intention here is to transmit hope, but not the kind of fragile hope that disappears in the face of difficulty. I want to ignite in you a strong, unshakable conviction that even in the middle of chaos, change is possible. This story is for young people who feel powerless, for adults who feel tired of broken systems, and for anyone who believes humanity can still rise above hate. The tone I use must be emotional, but also real. I don't want to glorify Mandela as a saint beyond our reach. I want to show him as a human being, one who faced impossible choices and carried scars, but still chose to fight with dignity. That is his secret power, the one we all can carry if we dare. Now, let me take you to the South Africa of Mandela's youth, a place of breathtaking landscapes but suffocating laws. This was a land where the government had written segregation into every detail of life. If you were black, you were told where you could live, which schools you could attend, and even which doors you could walk through. Entire families were uprooted simply because of the color of their skin. The system was called apartheid, and it was not only politics. It was cruelty turned into law. Mandela was born into this reality. He was not born with power, wealth, or privilege. He grew up in a society that told him from the very beginning that his life was worth less than that of others. Can you imagine carrying that weight from childhood? Being told not just what you can or cannot do, but who you are, defined by a label you did not choose? That was the air Mandela breathed every single day. But here is where the story begins to unfold. Instead of accepting that world as unchangeable, Mandela looked at it with fire in his eyes. As a young man, he studied law, not for prestige, but because he saw the law being used as a weapon against his people, and he wanted to turn that same weapon into a shield. In courtrooms filled with prejudice, he stood tall as a defender of freedom. When I reflect on this setting, I see how close it is to our reality today. Look at the modern world. Systems may not call themselves apartheid, but discrimination still decides who gets opportunities and who does not. Inequality still writes invisible laws that govern lives. Mandela's setting is not just history. It is the echo of the very society we live in now. Every great story has its conflict, and Mandela's was monumental. The apartheid regime was relentless. They saw his resistance not as courage, but as a threat to be eliminated. They arrested him, put him on trial, and eventually condemned him to life imprisonment, and so began 27 long years of captivity. Imagine this. The world outside changes. Your children grow into adults, your loved ones pass away, and you are stuck in a tiny cell with nothing but time and silence. 27 years, almost 3 decades of stolen life. How would you survive it? Many would collapse under the weight of despair, and yet Mandela endured. But the obstacle was not only external. Inside, he wrestled with emotions we all know: anger, bitterness, the desire for revenge. Each day in that prison was a test of whether he would let hatred consume him or let hope preserve him. This was Mandela's secret battle, not just against apartheid, but against the darkness that could have destroyed his own soul. When I compare that to today, I realize how similar our challenges are. We may not be in prison cells, but many of us live in invisible cages. Cages of prejudice, poverty, or even our own doubts. The conflict Mandela faced is the same question we face. Will we allow pain to harden us, or will we rise above it? His choice, made in the solitude of a cell, still speaks to us now. Through all of this, Mandela never lost sight of his goal. What he longed for was not vengeance. He did not dream of watching his oppressors suffer. His goal was bigger, brighter, and far more radical. He desired freedom, not only for himself, but for every man, woman, and child in South Africa. But freedom to Mandela meant more than breaking the chains of apartheid. It meant building a society where dignity was non-negotiable, where people could walk with their heads high, regardless of their skin color. He dreamed of a nation where children could grow up believing they were equal, not because the law allowed it, but because humanity demanded it. This desire became the fuel that kept him alive. Even as walls closed around him, he kept his inner vision wide open. And isn't that what we all need? A vision strong enough to carry us through dark seasons? Mandela teaches us that goals are not just about personal success. They are about collective transformation. Today, his desire echoes in movements across the globe. In protests against racial injustice, in voices demanding equality for women, in communities crying for peace instead of war. Mandela's dream was not South Africa's alone. It is a universal longing of every human being. And that is why his story is not only about the past. It is about the present, and it is about us. As the years passed, the world began to change. Outside the prison walls, resistance grew louder, and international voices condemned apartheid. Sanctions tightened, protests spread, and the South African regime began to feel the pressure. Yet inside those walls, I knew that freedom was not guaranteed. Even if I walked free one day, the greater challenges still lie ahead. How could a nation, scarred by centuries of hatred, ever learn to live together? When whispers and negotiations began, many of my people were filled with anger. They had lost loved ones, suffered humiliation, carried the weight of injustice on their shoulders. They wanted revenge, not reconciliation, and I cannot blame them. After decades of oppression, how easy would it be to forgive? At that moment, I felt the weight of a new obstacle pressing on my heart, the expectation that I would lead them not into war, but into peace. The government itself also tried to manipulate me, offering conditional freedom if I would renounce the struggle. But I refused. What good is freedom for one man if my people remain in chains? I chose to stay in prison rather than betray the dream of collective liberation. This is the obstacle we face today as well. When we see violence, racism, or inequality, our first reaction is often rage. We want to strike back, to repay hurt with hurt. But Mandela's path teaches us something different. Leadership means guiding people not toward vengeance, but toward a future worth living in. That is not weakness. It is the hardest, strongest choice of all. And then, after 27 long years, the day came. I walked through the gates of prison in 1990, greeted by a sea of faces, fists raised in hope. Yet as much as the world saw a celebration, I knew this was only the beginning. Freedom from a cell meant nothing if my nation remained imprisoned by hatred. The true turning point was not my release. It was a decision that followed. I chose forgiveness. I chose reconciliation. I chose to imagine a South Africa not defined by revenge, but by unity. For many, this was unthinkable. How could a man who lost almost 3 decades of his life extend a hand of peace to those who stole it from him? Yet I knew that without forgiveness, we would only exchange one prison for another. This choice became real through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Victims came forward to share their pain. Perpetrators admitted their crimes. It was raw, painful, and at times unbearable to witness. But it was necessary, because only by bringing darkness into the light could healing begin. Think about your own life. Have you ever held on to anger for so long that it began to poison you? Have you felt the weight of bitterness pressing you down? The turning point for me, and the secret power I carried, was realizing that forgiveness is not for the enemy. It is for us. It frees our hearts, our future, and our vision. And if an entire nation could begin to heal through forgiveness, imagine what your own life could look like if you embraced it too. In 1994, I stood as the first black president of South Africa. But my true victory was never the presidency. My greatest triumph was seeing millions of people, once divided by laws of hate, casting their votes side by side. That image of unity was the outcome I had carried in my heart for decades. Of course, challenges remained. Inequality did not vanish overnight. Poverty still plagued communities. Racism did not simply evaporate, but the chains of apartheid had been broken and a new path had opened. For the first time, we could dream of a South Africa built not on division, but on possibility. When I look back, I know the result was not perfect. But perfection was never the goal. Progress was. And progress was achieved, not because we crushed our enemies, but because we dared to believe that even the deepest wounds could be healed. The outcome of my journey speaks to the world today. Look around. Our nations are still struggling with division. Our communities still scarred by prejudice. Our headlines still filled with war. But my life proves that change, even the most impossible change, is possible. If South Africa could step out of darkness, then so can we. The question is whether we have the courage to lead with compassion. So why does Mandela matter now more than ever? Because his secret power, the power to transform hatred into forgiveness, division into unity, despair into hope, is exactly what our broken world needs today. Racism still scars societies. Inequality still crushes dreams. Wars still destroy lives. And yet, Mandela's example stands as a light, reminding us that another way is possible. But now I turn to you. If you were in Mandela's place, would you have chosen forgiveness over vengeance? Do you believe his actions were right, or would you have taken another path? These are not just questions about history. They are questions about how we live today, in our families, in our communities, and in our world. Backhand index pointing right. I invite you. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell me honestly, what would you have done in Mandela's shoes? Would you forgive, or would you fight differently? And don't forget to subscribe to this channel, because here we uncover powerful stories, some rarely told, that carry the wisdom we desperately need in our time. Mandela's life proved that one man's courage could heal a nation. The question that remains is simple. Will we let his lesson guide us, or will we allow the world to forget it? The choice is ours.